Welcome to Click for IB Biology. We're studying evolution and speciation, and in this particular video we're going to take a look at what is called adaptive radiation. There's a PDF of this presentation that's linked in down below into the description of this video. You can download that and annotate with your own notes, and then of course also down there you'll find 10 questions with answers that you can use to test your understanding and to secure your learning of this particular topic. Adaptive radiation, a process of evolutionary biology. And as our example of adaptive radiation, you will probably not be surprised that we're going to be looking at the story of the Galapagos finch. The Galapagos finch today is illustrated by 13 or 14 species, all evolved from a founder species that had migrated or traveled rather from the mainland South America, most likely from the Ecuador region, to the Galapagos Islands. And of course, in Ecuador today there are finches in the form of siskins, seed-eating birds. You can see that from the shape of the bill, which is here as a typical seed-eating bird. But out here on the Galapagos, there are, as I say, there are 13 or 14 different species. Most famously first identified by Charles Darwin in his visit to the Galapagos. But the true work on the Galapagos finches was carried out by Rosemary and Peter Grant. They conducted a 40-year study of the Galapagos finches, and at the publication of their work, both of which were working from Princeton most of the time, their 40-year publications provided extraordinarily detailed examples of the ecology of finches, or indeed of evolution in action. Well worth pursuing those. There is a famous HHMI, Howard Hughes Institute video on the grants, which I'll try to link that into the description so that you can follow this as well. It's an extraordinary piece of work on the diversification of these finches, of the initial finch that we'll presume, for the purposes of this video, came from Ecuador. It could possibly have come from the north, but I'll propose that it came from Ecuador. And this single finch arrived on the island and then began a process of radiation, that is, of species splitting events, where one species splits not just into two, but into a variety of other species, each under the subject or subject to quite different ecological stresses, which bring about the natural selection of different features and a diversification of the original finch population, which I'm illustrating here with my picture of the classic finch seed-eating beak, which is here like this. And I'm going to propose that the founder population arrived on the closer islands. I don't know that for a fact. It just seems a reasonable hypothesis. And that then, having founded a population here, the opportunity arose for other members of this population and this species to travel to close by islands, the islands of the Galapagos, of which we know today. And each of these islands is notable in presenting different ecological stresses and having different ecological niche. And under those different niche, they will select individuals to survive and reproduce, which have characteristics which are appropriate to functioning well in that niche, to surviving and then to reproducing. And so those characteristics are selected. And this is the beginning of the process of the selection and radiation, which begins with reproductive isolation of different groups, but with whom we can trace them back to the single founder population. So the difference with the Galapagos Islands is that these roles which these animals are playing, such as this leaf-eating finch, as opposed to down here we have a seed-eating finch. There's even a finch which actually uses twigs like a tool. There are those which are the ground finches, the small, medium and large ground finches, which you will hear about in the grants video. And so each of these finches fulfills a niche opportunity. Interestingly, if one goes back to the mainland, then those niche opportunities, which can be similarly found in the equatorial region, are occupied by very, very different species with different ancestral backgrounds. And yet these birds here, they have a common, more recent ancestor in the founder population of the finch-eating bird. And so, as we've mentioned before, they have this radiating process in which new species are formed by occupying very different niches and creating reproductive isolation between themselves. And if those birds were to come back and mix together, so let's say, for instance, that conditions change and the birds go back to other islands, they are now reproductively isolated from each other. As we would say, there has been speciation events with reproductive isolation involved. And I think in this case, we would argue that certainly some of the factors involved are allopatric speciation with the physical barriers, but later on there will be, through the evolution of these different finches, there will be sympatric behavioral differences between them as well. So let's just look at a summary of this adaptive radiation process. So there's, remember, in our founder population, we already have genetic variation, and that genetic variation creates the raw material to address the new ecological opportunities. Where an animal has the appropriate genetic makeup that it survives well to reproduce successfully in an isolated population, then we have our population isolation, and of course this will quickly lead to reproductive isolation and this isolation, and of course speciation. The occupation of these different islands in this case meant that there was an absence of competition, and so it was relatively, let's suggest, relatively straightforward for these populations to establish themselves and to begin this niche specialization that we see in the different types of finch which are there, because the niches at those times were not filled with birds, as birds had failed to actually reach the Galapagos before the finches were able to occupy those niches. So these are the component parts of the reproductive isolation, which results in the process of adaptive radiation that we have seen in this exemplar of the Galapagos finches. We have a link coming up on the left which is an extension of the topic of reproductive isolation with hybrid infertility. In the middle there's a chance to subscribe to the channel and our list of videos for evolution speciation on the right hand side for your convenience. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, please subscribe.